When you think of gimmick wrestlers in the West, who comes to mind? The Godfather, The Undertaker, Disco Inferno, The Fiend, El Dandy?
Wait a minute, El Dandy has you to doubt El Dandy, because this guy's a serious professional.
The East isn't any different. And on February 20th, 1958, the ultimate gimmick wrestler would be born. Going by the nickname Little Frankie, this professional Japanese wrestler would rise to the stardom in both pop culture and the underground culture of Japan soon after making his professional debut. So before shooting this, I actually sat for a while and thought about what the best way of talking, or at least introducing Little Frankie would be. And then I realized, I'll just show you. So, without further ado, this is the story of Masanobu Okamoto, aka Little Frankie of Midget Puroresu. Alright, let's just go ahead and address the elephant in the room right away. Little Frankie was a little person wrestler, and I know that's very taboo nowadays to talk about. However, that shouldn't take away from the decades upon decades of entertainment that the guy was able to give to Japanese audiences. And make no mistake, he was very popular. To fans of Japanese wrestling, specifically All Japan Women's Wrestling in the late 80s and early 90s, Little Frankie and his troupe, also consisting of Tomezo Tsunokaki and Mr. Buddha Man, were mainstay attractions of the AJW lower cards. Now, given the time frame, it's very easy to look at Midget Puroresu being added to the lower card division of the AJW as both degrading for the little person wrestlers as well as the women in the AJW. And while that may be true to some degree, if you've ever watched Japanese professional women's wrestling, you'll know that the matches and everything that they were putting on there was way more than just a cheap novelty. Because if I'm being completely honest, the women in the AJW are fucking hardcore. Hi. You also should keep in mind that this is pre-NWO/Attitude Era here in the West, and these women were unmercifully beating the living fuck out of each other. So to say that they were ahead of their time is a bit of an understatement, at least in terms of women's professional wrestling. When it comes to the Midget Puroresu being added on there, you could look at that as like a cheap novelty or a cheap gimmick attached to that, but the AJW League had prestige, so being a part of that promotion, I feel was a pretty big deal. Little Frankie would wrestle professionally for 26 years after turning 18. It's a shame, but most of Little Frankie's work pre-1991 has been lost or was not simply recorded. Even major resources like CageMatch.com only have his matches recorded from 1991 and up. So given the stigma that a lot of like little person wrestling kind of has nowadays, and just the overall PC nature of the world, I would not be that surprised if I found out that a lot of Little Frankie's work was just erased. That isn't to say it wouldn't be without merit. While doing research on this topic, I fell into a giant rabbit hole of other professional little people wrestlers, many of which I'll cover in the future, similar to my ongoing porn star series of videos. Shameless plug? Oftentimes, but not always the case, these wrestlers being brought together were basically for laughs and not to be taken too seriously. I'll level with you guys. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be holier than thou or try to claim moral superiority than thou and all that shit. Because to be honest, when I was watching a lot of these matches, because there's quite a few that still exist online, and you should really go find them if you are interested at all, because they are entertaining as fuck. And I gotta say, I was genuinely enjoying myself while I was watching these videos. So, guess that just makes me a garbage human being then.
You're a monster!
Most of Little Frankie's early life isn't very well documented. However, after turning 18, he would join the AJW, where he would work the remainder of his life. In 1976, he was also named Rookie of the Year for the league. No small feat for someone in the AJW league. It is very uncommon for a little person to receive accolades like this in the AJW. In truth, Little Frankie was a talented performer, oftentimes able to hold the audience in the palm of his hand, whether through humor or genuine talent when it came to wrestling and stage performances as well. Go back and watch any of Little Frankie's previous matches, and you'll see that the man had a larger-than-life persona about him. He just had this like very strong commanding presence every single time he stepped into the ring, and a lot of this was often attributed to the tongue-in-cheek nature of the way he handled his performances. There's no other way to say it, the dude was a master. Throughout his professional career, he would have a few different names. Most notably was the Great Little Muda, a parody of the professional wrestler of the same name, the Great Muda, who is often considered one of the greatest Japanese professional wrestlers in his own right. With his Great Little Muda gimmick, Little Frankie mimicked most of the Great Muda's trademarks, everything from his look to trademark poison mist spray at the beginning of a bout. He was also briefly known as Zap L, at least in the 90s, but his most notable name was that of Little Frankie, and would be credited so in almost all of his work in and out of the professional wrestling. Honestly, I was kind of surprised to find out that professional midget wrestling, at least here in the West, reached its peak in popularity in the 50s and 60s. So I guess it was just a different time then.
My man. But that's not right.
It really doesn't matter if it was the 50s or present day, because every single wrestling promotion in existence has their own titles. And Little Frankie was no exception, as he was the holder of the WWWA's Midget League Championship a total of 3 times throughout his tenure in AJW professional midget wrestling. His first title run match would be in 1991 against fellow troupe members Tomezo Tsunakaki. Later, he would end up unifying both the WWWA's World Midget Championship belt with the CMLL World Championship belt when he defeated Ananito Fili Estrella in 1995. He would hold the title for almost 3,000 days before losing it to Tomezo Tsunakaki. He would then win it back in 1998 and hold it for 2 years before dropping the title to the Buddha Man. Most of this is chronicled on CageMatch.com and also Wikipedia. I fully trust CageMatch.com as they are honestly one of the best professional wrestling sources out there. While Wikipedia, you never know. I did kind of mention it earlier, but a lot of Little Frankie's work is still available to watch online right now. You do have to do a little bit of digging, but it's not that hard to find. You can also find a lot of his different matches on various home releases through either VHS or DVD of the different AJW tapings that happen. And honestly, it's hard to make any specific recommendations on Little Frankie matches just because the guy literally never had a bad match, but to do you a solid, I'm going to go ahead and link a couple of really good ones below. They're not necessarily the best ones you can find, but they are, I'll just say you'll enjoy them at least a little bit. Whether it was a competitive bout or played up for laughs, which let's be honest now, let's not try to pretend anything, a majority of it was for comedy. Little Frankie still held a tremendous amount of charisma and delivered every single time he was in a match, whether he was competing or reffing in one. Yeah, it's one of the weirder bits with the AJW. They only seemingly ever hired 3 different little people to be in their wrestling promotions, and that was Little Frankie, Tomezo Tsunakaki, and Great Buddha Man. At least I'm assuming so. It's entirely possible there were other little people throughout their promotions. There are a couple other people throughout Little Frankie's career that do pop up, especially in like title changes. But the vast majority of Little Frankie's matches are going to be with either Great Buddha Man or Tomezo Tsunakaki. Usually the bouts would be one-on-one matches while the other would ref. If it was a handicap match, then a regular AJW ref would do the honors of reffing that match. I won't lie, the first time I saw another little person reffing the matches, I literally laughed out loud. I sat there and thought to myself, what the fuck difference does it make if it's a little person or not reffing this match? And then I realized that it was just the different members of the troupe taking turns reffing and everything. But I can't lie, every time I would see Little Frankie with that ref's uniform on, with that big shit-eating grin face, he always found a way to make me smile and laugh, because then he would genuinely proceed to just beat the shit out of someone with a fan. The guy was amazing. Little Frankie would never leave the business of professional wrestling. However, he did star in 2 movies, albeit in minor roles. The first up was the film Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. In it, Little Frankie played the role of Godzilla's son.
Godzilla says that I should learn to fight my own battles.
Honestly, that's exactly where my mind went when I first looked up Little Frankie in IMDb. But thankfully, that movie was released in 1969. No, this was a part of the early 90s reboot. Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla was released in 1995 and is actually the prequel to Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, which is one of my personal favorites. For a majority of the film, both Godzilla and his son are played by Hurricane Ryu Hurricane. Supposedly, they only brought in Little Frankie because they couldn't find a good way to make Godzilla and his son stand next to each other without it looking like complete shit. So they ended up bringing Little Frankie in, and honestly, the effect works really well, so thank God they ended up bringing him in on that, because I can't imagine what it would have looked like without him. If you are into Godzilla films, this one is honestly really good. It's very weird, but what Godzilla movie isn't? Little Frankie plays the part well, however, I'd argue that's more the work of the special effects department rather than the actor. He's in a giant rubber suit waving his arms around. Now, I'm oversimplifying the performance and everything, but this is also why I'm not a critic. I still think it's fucking awesome, though. The only other notable role Little Frankie starred in was the movie Blind Beast vs. the Dwarf, released in 2001. I bet you can't guess why he was cast. This is a horror movie that is about a writer who frequents an all-girls operetta only to meet two weird people at the beginning of the film. A man with his head slumped down and a dwarf samurai who is walking with a woman's arm that's been completely sliced off. Following this, the author decides to investigate it. Honestly, I have to come clean. That sounds fucking amazing. And in all honesty, you can actually find the movie pretty cheap on like Amazon. I think I found a copy on there for like maybe $10, something like that. And to be completely honest, I had every intention of purchasing it and watching it for this particular video. However, while I was doing research and right before I started shooting and recording and everything, another movie that I had been trying to find for a while popped up on Amazon with only one copy available. And I had to make a judgment call as to which one of those I was going to purchase. Longtime viewers will know I talked about the film Mysterious Concentrator during my Mariko Kawana video. I literally have never seen this for sale. However, during the production of this particular video, one just randomly decided to pop up on Amazon. And I knew I couldn't pass up this particular opportunity. So after looking at my monthly budget, I decided to purchase it. And it was expensive. Very fucking expensive. So I decided to purchase that instead, and we'll be covering it for Halloween this year. So hindsight's 2020, because I hadn't actually read the description of the Blind Beast and the Dwarf at the time when I had bought the Mysterious Concentrator. And I really wish I would have, because I would have totally bought both at the same time and just skipped out on lunch for basically the rest of the month. Maybe not, maybe a little over dramatic, but you know what I mean. So maybe in the future I'll have to purchase it and do like an odds and ends kind of thing where I go over that particular movie. As previously stated, Little Frankie continued to work in professional wrestling even during this time frame. His final match would be on June 30th, 2002, where he faced longtime rival and friend, the Buddha Man, in the Midget World Cup Finals, ultimately beating him and becoming the champion of the cup. Following the tournament, Little Frankie went on a break, but continued to train as he had every intention of returning to the ring and continuing to perform. However, on August 15, 2002, Masanobu Okamoto would suddenly and tragically pass away. At first, his death was ruled to be of an illness and later confirmed to be a heart attack. There isn't concrete evidence to suggest his dwarfism played any role in the heart attack, but it has been speculated as such online. Little Frankie was 44 when he passed away, meaning a majority of his life was spent on tour with the AJW, performing for crowds all along the way. You know, it's easy to look at a lot of Little Frankie's career and just say that, oh, he was just a cheap gimmick that was used by the AJW. He was an exploited individual and all these different things, but when he passed, it deeply affected a lot of different people. The dude was literally a hero to so many people, despite the fact that most of his in-ring work was comedy-based. When he passed away, that meant a lot to people that grew up watching him and that were genuine fans of him. I don't think I could put it any better than a couple of quotes that I found online after his passing. Note, this is translated from Japanese, so it's a little rough. The last little giant left has died. I sincerely pray for the soul of little giant Little Frankie, who gave us laughter and courage as a child. After his passing, Little Frankie was named the permanent WWWA's World Midget Champion and will remain so forever. Whether it was for his acts of comedy, technical prowess in the ring, or the courage he gave many people to look adversity in the face and keep fighting, Little Frankie above all else will be remembered for the hope, joy, and inspiration he gave to many people. I definitely think it's fair to say that he earned his title as Last of the Little Giants. Thank you guys so much for watching. I genuinely appreciate that. I'm going to keep this brief, kind of like before, just to try to keep these ending segments a little bit on the lower time frame wise. Wanted to give a quick shout out to Wrestling BIOS again this week. They didn't particularly help me in terms of content for this particular video. However, if it wasn't for his help in some of the previous videos, I wouldn't have been able to find some of the Little Frankie information that I was able to find for this video. So if you guys aren't subscribed to Wrestling BIOS, definitely go over there and check them out. They are fucking amazing. Anyway, thanks for checking out the video, guys. Look forward to the next one and all the other Halloween stuff I kind of got coming up. So I will catch you guys in the next one. Make sure to keep things light and rebellious, and have a good rest of the day.